I love to do furniture transformations and makeovers, and you guys have been craving them. Now, for my new subscribers who came on board basically within the last couple of years, you don't know that. So here is a recap of some of my most popular furniture transformations. Now, this video is going to be a little long, but I'm going to break it down into chapters, so you can just click onto the chapter that you may be interested in, and also file this video, because that way you can reference it again and again and again. You're going to be able to see how I do upholstery projects, how I stage them out, and so I can just enjoy the process and not overexert myself. That's what I want you guys to do. Now, while we're at home, let's go ahead and plan out some projects and go ahead and get busy doing them. I've got some new DIYs coming up that have to do with home decor, and I'm excited. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go down memory lane for some, and then or just see these for the first time and be excited. Let's go to work. Hi everyone, welcome to Amateur Decorating Like a Pro. I'm Catherine. Today is a good day for me to get caught up on some projects in the garage. The weather warmed up just a tad, and with the addition of a small heater, I can get this bench done today. So guys, I want to say, if you've got some indoor projects that maybe you can get done, maybe just carve out a corner in a room, get these small furniture transformations done, and when spring gets here, you can just decorate like crazy on a budget. So we're gonna hop into the garage. We've got our work cap on and no makeup day. Let's go ahead. Let's go to work. I was so excited to get started. I'm using all of the original corner brackets and screws. I didn't have to buy any additional hardware, so I'm really excited about that. That's the one thing why you want to examine these pieces. What can you recycle? Now, this is a very structural sound piece, and I'm excited about that. So I just went ahead and cleaned it up with some Murphy oil soap on a damp cloth, and I took it into the dining room just to see how it would fit into the space. Put a quick rug down, and I liked what I saw, and I knew I was going to go ahead and dive right into the project. Now, running the risk of failing at upholstery terminology, I'm just going to dive in. This board right here was a little loose, and I noticed there were two of them on opposite sides. So with this bench being so long, I decided to remove them from the ends of the bench and move them toward the middle of the bench. So why am I moving these boards? Well, in my opinion, the middle of the bench tends to get the most work. That's where most people tend to sit. And that's where most of your benches seem to sag. Now, I have Gorilla Construction glue attaching that board to the side of the bench. And for extra reinforcement, I am using corner brackets. And the black screw here is the original screw. So it's basically acting as a pilot screw. So I can apply the one that comes with the corner bracket with ease into the board. So I put one of these corner brackets on each side. One's high and one's low. So I'm not overworking the same location. Now, having fallen in love with construction glue, I make sure that I have plenty of it on hand, the Gorilla brand, of course. And I was a little concerned about one of the corners, so I did apply some glue there as well as a few additional screws, and then I clamped it in place overnight, just taking a precaution. And if you feel that way about any area of your piece, take the precaution, apply the construction adhesive, and wait 24 hours. So the very next day is really all about the seat cushion, but I know you're going to notice that the bench has actually been painted. This is my homemade recipe for chalk paint. There's a very old video out there that I will find and link to this video. Now, I just painted it because I wanted a base coat on it. So maybe later on I might want to remove the skirt, which is what this is, a skirted bench video, and then add a base coat of or even a finish coat of maybe a pearl or a seashell, something that will match my dining room chairs. So with that flexibility in mind, I wanted to go ahead and do this right now. So this is the point in which you would add your stains or even just add your polyurethane, whatever you wanted to add to the bench. This is the point in which you would do it before you add your seat cushion. Well, I decided not to have the board overlap the bench, so I knew I needed to make a cut. So I got out my little roto razor saw. I love this. I mean, I can handle it. It fits right into my hand, and it can really cut a wood that's almost an inch thick. So pretty easy to follow a straight line with that small little opening there right on my pencil mark, and I can just get it done. So I made the cut right here in the garage. I should have taken this step, but I didn't. I should have applied pilot hose in those corner brackets using a 1/2 inch screw. And then when it was time to put the board on top of the bench permanently, I wouldn't have had to drill the holes straight into the bench. But I was comfortable doing that, and you may not be. So please use a 1/2 inch screw to make pilot holes. Now here's another thing that you all don't have to do, like painting that I did. I rounded the edges of my board and I sanded them down as well. I would advise you also to make notes on your boards, like the measurements. So if you decide to do this project again and just replace the board, you have the measurements written on the bottom. Use symbols so you can put everything in the right direction every single time. Now my foam measures 52 inches long, and it is a 3-inch foam. I got it from Joann's and I paid around $40 for it. Next, I placed my foam on the floor and I used a Sharpie to mark it. My electric knife is the cheapest one they had at Walmart. It's around $10 and it does an amazing job. My advice is to cut all the way through the foam when you are cutting, not halfway, but all the way, and you'll get a nice clean cut. I like a nice curved edge to the foam, just like I did on my dining room chairs. So I decided to do the same thing, a nice beveled edge on the foam. And you really don't have to make a large cut to achieve this. And again, another step that's optional for you. Now, I am not a fan of spray adhesives. They just make me itch. I can't even talk about it without wanting to itch. But anyway, guys, I'd like using a little tiny bit of hot glue, very thin lines of it, just along the edges, maybe about 2 inches or so away from the corner. It works like a charm, and it does hold your foam in place for you. Now just roll your batting over the top of the foam and make sure you have enough to have at least 2 inches of it tuck underneath the actual board. You want to have that so that you can staple it down or glue it down. And then you just cut. That's it for the batting. You lay the corner. You have some a little bit longer on the other side, but that's fine. And that's how you don't waste batting, because if you're like me, you're bound to need it again and again. Now I don't want to add tons of staples into my board, so I am using, again, hot glue to apply my batting, and I'm very lightly applying the hot glue. I mean very lightly. So this is just enough to hold it in place, because I'm going to come right behind this and add fabric and staple it down. A word of advice, don't apply any hot glue around the corners of the board. Now this bench is 52 inches. The fabric is 56 inches. So basically I'm able to just place the bench on top of the fabric and use only 3/4 of a yard. And I'm allowing for about 2 inches to come over the front and the back of the bench. And of course on the sides, having that 56 inches versus the 52 inches in the fabric, that's going to be a great help. But I will need to stretch this fabric just a little bit. I made my one cut and I nailed down the sides of the fabric using very small nails, and I'm going to remove those when I apply the staples. Securing the fabric with those small nails on the sides of the bench cushion was a great idea. Look how smooth the fabric looks across the top. And that cushion is still going to be very soft. So now let's just start stapling. So on the back of my seat cushion board, I've got my tools, my small hammer, my pliers, and I've got my welt stretcher there. I've got my stapler remover, my scissors, extra staples, and I'm good to go. The bowl is there in case I have to remove a staple, and I need a place to put it. And I like the sound of them hitting the bowl, so I know they're not landing on the floor. And these stretchers are perfect, guys. They take the pressure off of your thumb, your palm, and your wrist. Just a good pinch of the fabric and they hold them in place. To staple the fabric, I start in the center and then I go to the left and right of my center staple and work my way down to 5 inches away from the actual corner. I don't staple all the way to the corner, and you'll see why. I wanted to learn a different way of doing the corners on these pieces. So this is really a determined learning process for me. Now, while I'm stapling the fabric, I am paying very close attention to the tension that I put on the fabric with those stretchers. If I see that I'm creating a bit of a dimple in the foam, then I know I'm holding it too tight because I only want one smooth line. So pay attention to that, whether you're using pliers or whether you're using your fingertips. Just notice how tight you're holding the fabric because it can appear a little bit wavy in the foam and things look a little more homemade when you do it that way. As I mentioned earlier, you don't staple all the way down the side. Just stop about 5 inches short of your corner. Now you can use pliers or you can just gently use your thumb and your forefinger to pull the fabric around the corner. And just make sure there's this nice smooth curve there. And then apply 1 or 2 staples there at the corner. Again, pliers or your fingers, but make sure that you're not putting a lot of pressure with your fingers. You don't want to strain them. So I am wiggling the fabric a little bit just to make sure the corner edge is smooth and then applying my staple. And like I said, if you want to use the pliers, then please do so. And if you see that there's a little dimple or a little ruffle in the fabric, then just wiggle it just a little bit until it's smooth along the edge and then apply your staple. And that's the new way. I wanted to learn to smooth out my corners. Now, am I perfect at it yet? No, but at least I'm in the game. Now listen, if you've never picked up a stapler or a hammer or even a pair of pliers, the time is now, because chances are you can do a lot of these minor little updates around your home. Maybe you're not doing a skirted bench like I'm doing today, but I guarantee you, you can cover a seat cushion. We were all designed to create, and I am excited to show you every single detail in my videos, because if I can do it, you can do it. Here's a secret for you. During those after summer clearance events at Dollar General, they have these large rolls of landscaping fabric for just $1. I buy every one of them because I know I'm going to have projects. Now, this is where you can say, hey, I just want to do a coffee table, turn one into a bench, or just cover a bench. This is your stopping point. You just take your covered seat cushion and just screw it to the top of your bench or coffee table or whatever it is that you are transforming. And guys, this is it. Isn't this beautiful? If I added my finish to this, I could just walk away and say I'm totally done. But isn't that 3-inch foam worth it? The fabric that I'm using has these gorgeous silver threads in it. Hobby Lobby also has the one with the gold threads in it, and it's really pretty. So this is the one that I used when I recovered my dining room chairs, and this is the leftover fabric that I'm using on this bench. For my panels, I just drape the fabric, and I want to have enough to do a 2-inch hem, and I want to have enough to have 2 inches at the top that I could staple to the actual bench. I'm not cutting along the sides because I'll just fold those down, and if you don't want to add a lining, you can just use stitch witchery to just press in that nice closed seam. Now first let me share this. All of the panels, the 2 for the front and the back, as well as the 4 for the corners and the 2 side panels, are all 22 inches long. Now back to the corner panels. They're 22 inches long, but after I've folded in the sides, they're 6 inches wide. And that's a good width for those. You can go a little bit wider if you want, but mine are 6 inches. Let me show you how to make a lining on a very small budget. You don't have to use expensive fabric to do upholstery. This inexpensive fabric comes from Joann's and Walmart. It was about the same price. Either way, either place you go, it's going to be about $3 a yard. There are 4 corner panels here. I pressed them, I pressed the hem, I pressed the sides, and I use those fold lines as guides for measuring out the lining. Yes, I use a pressing cloth, especially for upholstery. I lay the panels on top of the lining, and that lining is actually folded in half lengthwise, and I only needed a small side of one side of the lining fabric. I folded in half, and I folded in half again. Now we take our panel, right side facing upward, take your lining, lay it on top of the panel. Go to your sewing machine and stitch the sides of the lining to the sides of the panel, but leave an opening of about 1 inch on the bottom. Now here I'm pinning one of the side panels before I stitch it. I want you to see what I'm talking about leaving 1 inch of an opening at the bottom. You see, the bottom part of the lining will be sewn to the edge of the fabric for the hem. This is not complicated. I stitched top to bottom on both of the sides. I left that opening of 1 inch, and then across the bottom I stitched the hem of the fabric to the lining. Now these 2 large panels are for the front and back of the bench. I don't waste my time cutting away the salvage edge of the fabric. This is underneath, and if you're looking underneath my furniture, well, you're not going to be invited back. I did not do the monogramming. I had it done by a professional, and isn't it stunning? All of the panels are ready. Step 1, attach all of the corner panels. Now, I have been reading some wonderful blogs that really focus around traditional homes, and I am loving the style of benches that are coming out right now, and they are along this line, guys. So the skirted furniture pieces is really making a huge comeback, even though they haven't really gone away. Just everyone just kind of went away from them, but they're headed back this way. Now, I considered using piping to finish off this bench, but I changed my mind. I decided to use the tack strip a little bit differently this time, and I placed it in between the panel on the fold, and then I stapled it down. So basically, the panel will drape over and it'll look a little fluffy, and that way the seam or the line between the seat cushion and the bench isn't so wide. And with the help of a few binder clips, I'm able to hold my panel in place around that tack strip underneath. Now, I know this video is long just for a skirted bench, but I know you guys, you will send me emails and pictures, and then you will go into the comments area and say, what about this part? You weren't very clear on this or that. So I wanted to do my best to get as much information in this video as possible so I can move on to other projects that you're going to definitely love. Now the front panel and the back panel are much larger than those sides and corner panels. So it will look like it's starting to hang a little crooked. You can adjust that by sliding that fabric around the tack strip. I'm moving that lining up a little bit so that it looks smooth. So that's why I really wanted to do the tack strip method. And once I'm sure everything is hanging straight, I just staple it down permanently. Don't worry about all of these fraying threads hanging from underneath. So here's what I did. I cut away that old fraying edge and I created a new edge. I then folded my new edge back onto the tack strip, and I took small amounts of glue and I adhered the fabric to the tack strip. So when the panel is draped back over, you don't see any of that thread. This is what it'll look like after you've added your cushion to the bench. Okay, don't judge me and don't try this at home. This handsome guy is actually a weight for me right now. Remember those pilot holes that I recommend that you make? Well, our son is sitting on the bench to apply pressure while I insert the screws, and the weight from his body will keep the bench in alignment until I'm done, and the screws will not go completely through the seat cushion. Now, I'm all about an easy refresh when it's just moving around a few pieces. But I started out in the living room with my new bench, and I loved it. It refined the space. It really did. Just a few adjustments with the chair here or there. And I just love that it elevated that space so easy. And secondly, I can put my feet up and enjoy the fireplace in the living room. The second thing I did was move it into our bedroom, and I loved it. It refined that space. The pillows are from the couch, guys, so it was just a quick update here. And I do work out at the foot of the bed, and I have 2 baskets with weights in them. This would be perfect in our bedroom. Isn't that pretty? The other space, well, rightfully so, where I wanted it to be first and foremost, was the dining room. And I love it here so much. But I gotta tell you, when I want to do a refresh, there's no telling where this bench could end up. And I love the way it turned out. I love our monogram, and I had 2 extra panels done so I could make throw pillows for the chairs in the dining room, and or when I do a refresh in the living room or bedroom. Isn't that monogram beautiful?
I'm going to go ahead and put on my little work gloves. Definitely don't want to get any scratches because sometimes I might run across a staple or two that may cause a little damage. So I've started to pull this off, so I think I can just pull.
Now, the first time that I reupholstered these chairs, I used a heavy-duty stapler, the kind where you have to squeeze the handle. In other words, the staples were barely inserted in the chair. I was on a budget and I had just purchased my first home. Now here's something else that I was excited about. I was able to get accurate measurements from the pieces of fabric that I took off of the chairs. It helps if you can get whole pieces to get these measurements, but if you cannot, then basically measure your seat and the back or the sides of your chair to get the measurement. Now I am constantly moving my chair on its side and on its back. It's much easier for me with the pliers in my hand to pull downward than it is to pull upward. It certainly helps me with avoiding injuries and strain on my wrist. Now let's remove any nails or staples. Now after my quick removal of the fabric, I did a thorough inspection of the chair. So I decided to use some wood filler to fill up all of those old staple holes in the chair. This one I got from Walmart. Now I am using a plastic knife to apply it. It's just perfect for fitting right inside this little groove. And then after you've applied it, just wait a couple of hours for it to dry. Then come back and lightly sand the area. Now this nail file has a 100 and a 180 grit for sanding, and it's perfect for this narrow space. Now, word of caution, be sure to keep your workspace nice and clean when you're doing upholstery. You never know where staples or nails could be embedded and cause scratches to your new fabric or even to the furniture itself. Make sure you keep a small trash can close by so when you are working with staples that you can go ahead and immediately dispose of them in the trash can. Now, with the exception of some of the dye from the other fabric fading onto the batting, everything is in excellent condition. The structure of the chair, the foam, the old batting, everything looks great. So minimal purchases on my part. I love that idea. Now, I had heard of these synthetic brushes at Walmart, and guys, I am so glad that I tried them out. They were $2.47 for a set of 3. And along with my chalk paint recipe, hey, I got great results. Now, a couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to speak with someone who did upholstery professionally, and I asked the question, do you guys always use new foam, new batting, etc. every time you reupholster a piece for a client? And she said, what goes on behind closed doors stays behind closed doors. Now, to make my homemade chalk paint, I'm using the Olympic Always Almond. You'll get the item number in the info box. Now, I scheduled day 2 to be paint day, and that's all we're going to do today. I've got multiple coats of paint on these chairs until I'm satisfied with the finish. So now, let's give ourselves a break. Now this is that Valspar Clear Protector. Just stir it up and lightly paint it onto your furniture. Today, let's just work on applying fabric to the back of the chairs. I love the design on this fabric, and to make sure that it mirrored itself on the front and on the back, I placed the chair on top of the fabric, and the fabric has the wrong side facing upward. And then I took a piece of chalk and I traced around the outside of the chair. You want to make sure I have enough to fit into those edges, so it's best to trace around the outside. Now, I'm not sure what this design is called. I don't know if it's a fleur-de-lis in an elaborate state or not. I'm just not sure, but I know that I like it. So once I finished tracing the chair on top of the fabric, I removed the chair, just double checked and made sure that that medallion was in the center of the chair. Next, I made my very first cut, and this will be the template for the other 3. I placed my first cut on top of the very next section, lining up the design perfectly. They're mirror images of one another. And then I cut my second and third and fourth pieces. Now these are the same steps that I would take if I were making matching pillows. Now I decided that the larger leaf in the very center determined the direction that the fabric would be placed. In other words, that's the top of the fabric. Now I really wanted the fabric to be centered, so I placed dots in the center of the top and the bottom and in the center of the sides. I'm using these small little nails to nail in the fabric just before I begin to staple it. And I want to just do one more check to make sure that it is properly centered. Now the nails were removed as I was stapling the fabric. Now I've had my air compressor and stapler for about a year now, and I was missing a part. So guys, I got that taken care of so I could expedite some things in this series. It took me 4 minutes and 25 seconds to staple this fabric to the back of the chair. Now this fabric is from Hobby Lobby. It is $34.99 a yard. I purchased 1.5 yards and I got 40% off of that. So I spent basically $32 for the fabric. Now I trimmed down my fabric about maybe 1.5 inches away from the stapled line, and then I applied a line of hot glue along my staple line. That way you do not see the hot glue from the other side. Now, even though I spent $5.36 for webbing, I did not use it. This fabric is already nice and tight, and I feel it's secure. Now here is another opportunity to recycle. Remember the advice I received from a professional? Well, this is the original foam and batting. The foam is still almost 1 inch thick. Looks like that was the original thickness. So guys, I'm going to recycle it in the back of my new design. I placed down the foam first and then added the batting on top of it. Then I take my fabric and made sure that the design on the fabric was facing the right direction. I tucked it underneath the foam. Now it's easy for me to tell that the fabric is centered because the design on this fabric lines perfectly up with the fabric on the back of the chair. So now all I have to do is tuck in a little napkin fold on the corner, so now I can add my tacks. Now I get it, most people would rather have neutral furniture and have decorative pillows, but every now and then you might want to come outside of the box and do a printed fabric on your furniture. Now, even though my rubber mallet is close by, I like to use this tiny little hammer that my husband gave me. The good thing about it, guys, is I can just add a small piece of fabric on top of the nail head and just get it done with my tiny little hammer. And I don't leave any scratches with that little piece of fabric on top. Now I did consider using the decorative nail head trim, but I changed my mind. One, it wasn't the finish that I wanted, and two, I just didn't like how they looked, at least not for this project. So I'll just keep them on reserve for something else. Now, several years ago, I purchased several bags of these on Amazon, and if I can find that information, I will link it in the information box. But they are pewter, the right finish and the right size. Now, I really don't want you guys to stress out about using beautiful printed fabric, and if you have a chair that's made in a very unique way, like the way the arms are on this chair, if you'll notice, I'm using pliers to get into a very small space and my favorite tiny little hammer, and of course I'm using the fabric to cover up the nail as well as protect the chair. You really should be using a mallet, of course, but that is the exception for me. I cannot get that done with the mallet. It will probably leave marks on the chair or damage the fabric. Well, it's about 9:15 p.m. and I'm going to stop for today, I think. Having the back of the chairs completed is a major accomplishment. And then tomorrow we will work on the seat cushions. Good night, everybody. So we begin our day by recycling the original foam. I did purchase additional foam for other projects. It's all over the garage, but this is really good. So I'm going to go ahead and recycle it. It's about 2 inches thick, which was obviously the original measurement. And all I have to do is reinsert it, put the batting on top of it, and then add the new fabric. Now this is the original seat cushion fabric lying on top of the new fabric, which is folded in half. I only needed to purchase 1 yard of new fabric to cover the seat cushions, both of them. And if you've ever worked with corduroy or velvet, they tell you to always cut it in the same direction, or shall I say stitch it in the same direction. So you remember the mistake that I made at the beginning of the video with the leaves going in opposite directions. So I'm moving my hand along the fabric to check and see how it should flow. Well, I want it to flow downward, in other words, toward me on the seat cushion. So I'm labeling what's the front and what's the back of the fabric. So when I lay it onto the chair, I'll be consistent in the direction with both of the chairs. Now this painter's tape didn't stick at all, so later on you'll see that I wrote the letters B and F directly onto the fabric, very lightly of course, so it doesn't come through the fabric. Like I mentioned earlier, this new piece of fabric is folded in half, so there's nothing I can do about the size. I am gaining about 1.5 inches on the sides, especially for stapling. And on the very front and on the back, I'll have an additional 2 inches. Now the cost of the fabric for the seat cushions is $17.99 a yard at Hobby Lobby, but I got 40% off the fabric, making it $10.79 for enough fabric to cover both of the seat cushions, only 1 yard. Now I decided to update the batting in the seat cushions, so I went to Joann Fabrics. You know how it is with a 50% off sale in home decor and upholstery. So guys, I got my batting for $4.99 for 1.5 yards. That was enough for both of the seat cushions. Now there are no heavy spray adhesives, guys. That wasn't in the original upholstery, and I'm continuing on with that legacy. I'm tucking that batting underneath just as it was when I first discovered how this chair was upholstered. And I'm staying away from the front band or the side bands of the chair because that's the area where I'm going to be stapling the actual fabric. Now this chair has 3 metal strips in the bottom of the seat cushion, so I have to be careful that the staple does not hit those metal strips, or else it's just going to pop back out or either pop and hit something in the garage. So I later marked those with painter's tape and even a few dots on the fabric when I placed it on top of the seat cushion, just as a precaution. Now, I have come to understand the best way to get these things done is to do all of the same parts of your chairs at the same time. Like work on seat cushions one day, work on the back of the chairs one day. That way, if you find a faster way of getting something done, then you can quickly move on to the next chair and do it and not forget the trick that you just learned. I place my fabric on the chair as if it was a tablecloth. You know, you make sure everything is centered. And then I placed a couple of staples in the front, in the back, and on the sides. So later on, I can remove those staples as I'm applying the fabric permanently. And once again, as a precaution, I'm using painter's tape to mark the location where those metal pieces are. So now I'm just beginning the process of stapling the fabric down across the back. And as you can see, my trusty pliers are right there with me, so I don't want any extra strain on my wrist. They help me to pull the fabric as needed. Now I wanted to show you this so you'd be clear as to what direction I'm going in. This is the back of the chair, and yeah, I made some mistakes right there, guys. This is where that metal piece was. That's why I had the tapes and I hit the mark. So I did go across the back first, and now I'm doing the side, and that's all stapled. So now I'm on the other side, and I do the front dead last, because then I'm going to pull all of this fabric to the front
and that way it'll get a nice sloping motion on the edge. So that's why we're doing it this way, guys.
Now, to wrap the fabric around the base of your armrest, whether it's on the back of the chair or the front of the chair, all you need to do is make 2 cuts into the fabric, just like I'm doing right here, and then take that small center piece. That's a piece that you can kind of cut a little bit off the bottom before you tuck it under, and then just pull tightly both sides on the left and on the right, and it'll be nice and smooth. Now, you don't have to do this, but I chose to build up this area around my armrest because the last time that I did the upholstery, duplicating what was there before, I found that there was a gap between the upholstery and the armrest, and I didn't want that to happen again. Now, I can always go back and turn the chairs over in the living room and add the lining underneath, right there on the spot. So now the back and the sides of the chair, they're done. All I have to do now is the front. So I start to stretch the fabric toward the front using my trusty faithful pliers, and I begin stapling from the center toward the sides. I am loving the results, guys. The corners and the front look really crisp and tailored, if I say so myself, me and my amateur status. Well, this is great, guys. The next step is to add another row of staples above this one and trim away the fabric. And by the way, adding that extra row of staples is optional. Now, I love using the artist paint brushes to do my touch-ups. I just don't want to take the chance of having too much paint on a large brush and having drops of it follow my fabric. Using my tiny little hot glue gun, I applied the trim on top of the staples. And I must say, it looks really good, guys. I purchased my trim from Hobby Lobby. I got 2.5 yards for $3.13. Well, friends and family, I was blessed and happy to have these chairs when they looked like this. But now look at them. And I saved a lot of money by doing this myself. Now, I got an estimate on having these chairs done professionally. Well, it was $160 per chair, and that excluded the fabric, the nail heads, etc. So I'm thankful to have completed this with just using a paint sample and mixing it with some plaster of Paris to get the color that I wanted, and putting the labor in it at my own pace. Now, this is an attached cushion ottoman with a skirt that I got for $5. Removing the skirt from the ottoman as well as the fabric was really easy. Now, my goal is to have an ottoman with exposed legs and clean lines, something that's very modern. Now, using a marker, I traced an outline of the old cushion onto the new cushion. The old foam was 5 inches and the new foam is 4 inches. I placed my new foam on top of the old ottoman base. I added multiple layers of batting so the edges of my foam would be smooth. I applied multiple rows of staples around the bottom of the ottoman. I wanted to make sure that foam didn't move at all. Now, I love using this large roll of brown paper to make templates and crafts. You can buy these at Lowe's for around $11. So you're going to need to take a couple of measurements. You already have your template for your fabric to go on the top, but you're going to need a band that goes all the way around the ottoman. So you'll need to measure the height as well as the diameter of the ottoman. I wrote the information down on the back of my template, and of course I allowed enough for a seam allowance. Then it was time to do an actual fitting. Now this is the part that I did not include in the earlier video, the actual fitting of the fabric. You turn the fabric inside out, and then you use straight pins or upholstery pins to pin the fabric together. You make your seam line with the pins. You can use clips, straight pins as well. But nevertheless, while you're pinning it, stretch the fabric as tight as you possibly can. And then all you have to do is slide it off and give it a quick stitch on the sewing machine. The first thing I did was to stitch the band, just one single seam. It's about 12 inches long. This will be in the center of the back of the ottoman. Now you want to attach the band to the top piece of fabric. Just follow that line of pins all the way around. Slide your cover back onto your ottoman. Now I pulled the fabric tightly with my pliers while I was stapling it to the bottom of the ottoman. And always start to staple in the middle and work your way outward. Now remember to keep your scissors handy because you'll need them to maneuver around the legs of the ottoman. Now for the legs, all you have to do is make 2 splits. That's on the left and on the right. You do not cut the one facing the corner. Again, just 2 splits, and then fold the fabric inward underneath and staple down both sides. That's it. So the 2 arrows mark the places where I made the 2 cuts. And to get rid of some old fabric, I made it into a dust cover for the bottom of the ottoman. Now, if you are using lightweight fabric and you don't have a sewing machine, then you can take it to a seamstress or someone that does alterations. As long as your pins are nice and snug, they can run this quick little seam down the back and around the top. You take it back home and fit it on top of your ottoman and you're good to go. So our $5 ottoman is done. Now let's work on our 2 free chairs. Now these Queen Anne style chairs would cost me around $350 per chair to have reupholstered. So I'm pretty sure that if I study them carefully, I can figure it out. Now I thoroughly inspected both of the chairs before we began to rip fabric off of them, and they are in excellent condition. I'm pleasantly surprised. Now, using an upholstery guide that I purchased about 3 years ago, I labeled all of the parts of this chair, from the front band to the cushion to the inside arm on the left and on the right, the inside back as well as the outside back. And then you also have the outside arm on the left and on the right. And I did this because I'm going to use these parts as templates to cut the fabric. I hate to waste fabric, and what better way to make a pattern? Now guys, I did not film the removal of the fabric. Our oldest son was on summer break and he had 2 weeks to just relax, but I gave him a little project. So he just removed the fabric for me. I had him to pull the pieces off in whole pieces. Hopefully I would get enough between the 2 chairs to have a full pattern for 1 chair. And he managed to get this done in about 4 hours so he could hurry up and go back to bed. Now this cotton style batting is my least favorite batting. I can't stand this stuff. So I'm definitely getting rid of that. This foam, getting rid of that. And this batting underneath, I'm not sure of the name of it, but it is going away as well. Now looking around the back side, it looks like the webbing is in pretty good shape. So I'll just need to stretch it and tighten it up a little bit, or I might just add a few pieces. Now I'm quickly tossing that cotton style batting into the trash, but I'm setting aside the actual foam because it's going to be a template for cutting my new foam. Now these chairs and ottoman are probably about 40 years old, and that means the hardware is also just as old. The staples were difficult to pull out and they were breaking in half, so I decided to take a small hammer and just nail them into the furniture flush so that they aren't sticking up. So this is what we accomplished on day 1. Now I'm feeling pretty confident that I have a lot of the things that I will need to complete this project already. So I start by taking inventory of the things that I have at home. Now, over 2 years ago, I put together this upholstery tote, and I started to shop for my supplies on a budget. As you can see, I've got the rubber mallet, and I've got box cutters, staple pullers, and things like that. And even nail heads. I ordered stuff online from Amazon based upon the things that I saw in this upholstery book. And I made my list so that I would always have the standard supplies. So whether they were $9 or $5, I would bring them home and put them into this bin. And having this organizational system has saved me a lot of time and money. Now, according to the upholstery yardage chart, you can find them on Pinterest, these 2 chairs will take 5 yards of fabric each. That's 10 yards. This is why using the old pieces as templates will save you money. Now I am combining 2 fabrics, one solid and one print. This fabric was purchased at Forsyth Fabrics in Atlanta. It was $25 a yard. I got 5 yards of it. And hello, it was a gift. Now I purchased this fabric from Hobby Lobby in October of 2016. And yes, I got 40% off. Now I measured the horizontal length of the inside bag across the cushion and down the front band. So this is how I came up with 2 rolls of poly foam. I purchased them separately on 2 separate days so I could get the 40% off each one of them. Now I purchased 3 yards of this fluffy style of batting, and I got it from Joann's for $16. They had a 70% off deal. Now I purchased this heavier batting for about $24 and then another 40% off for 6 yards at Hobby Lobby. This is jute webbing. It supports the bottom and the backs of your chairs. I got it for $1.49 a yard, 3 yards, and 40% off at Hobby Lobby. I found this tack strip at Walmart. Don't quote me, but I think it's around $5. Now, one day ago, I purchased this dust cover fabric, 5 yards of it, from Walmart for $6.97. And upholstery pens for $3.64 at Walmart. And lastly, I wanted to stain the legs of the chairs. So I'm using this Kona Rust-Oleum stain. Got it from Walmart for about $5. And then of course this protective clear finish, I found that at Lowe's. And it is also about $5. Well, now that we've used our brain and done our inventory, let's work with our hands. I lightly sanded the legs of the chairs and then wiped them down to remove all the dust. And then I applied the stain. Now, just like it said on the label, 1 coat of this stain will dry in 1 hour. I was impressed. I applied my top coat finish with a sponge brush. Yeah, here's the before and here's the after. Don't you think that looks much better? And by the way, these bed risers are perfect for all of my upholstery projects. Now, our newly painted chair legs were left to dry overnight. Now that little tube-like foam around the edge was already there. I didn't touch it or try to remove it. It makes your seat cushion edges look smooth and it keeps all of the contents in place. Now our trash pickup is tomorrow and I'm so motivated by that timeline. I've got the foam, the old cushion lying on the foam, shall I say, and I'm going to trace around it and then I'm going to cut it out with my new carving knife. Now I'm adding about an extra inch to 1.5 inches around the edges because our foam has experienced some shrinkage over the years. And based on how I laid it out, I was able to cut 1 inside back and 1 seat cushion from each roll of foam, and I had some left over. And by the way, my little carving knife was $9.97 from Walmart. Now, this batting resembled what was originally there, and that's why I decided to go with it. So it is basically 2-ply because I folded it in half, and I'm stapling it inside of that trim that I did not disturb. And that's what's going to be in place underneath the foam. And then I trimmed the edges. Don't worry, we'll just fold it inward so that the foam will lay directly on top of it. Now, I prefer not to use spray adhesives when doing upholstery. It makes me itch. So I've decided to try and avoid it every way possible. Now, I've gone from a 1-inch foam to a 2-inch foam. I want the chairs to be nice and comfortable. They're going to be in a master bedroom. So I am tucking that foam underneath all of the edges along the side and in the back. Now I'm using a pair of scissors to cut little splits along the inside arm, underneath the outside arm, so I can make sure that this foam lays flat before I actually do the major trimming. Again, no spray adhesives for me. And for the back, just cut away a little square right there in the corner. Then tuck the foam underneath the inside arm frame and underneath the back of the chair. Now, as I was stapling the foam around the front of the chair, I was constantly lifting it up because I wasn't sure if I was stapling directly into that foam trim or if I was going beyond it. Now, at this point, I let my electric knife do the work. I was careful to keep my knife away from the top of the seat cushion as well as from the edge of the chair. Now keep in mind, I'm going to be laying on a sheet of batting, so you're not going to see any of these rough indentations on the foam left behind by the knife. So now we have our foam lying on the back of the chair. We're not adding any batting to the back of the chair. We're just placing our foam on top of that facing, which is on top of the webbing, those little stripes going across. Now, we do not push the foam underneath the edge of the chair in the back. You want your fabric to be able to go through there very easily. So I'm going to staple the edge of the foam to the bottom of that back. There's a board that runs directly across there. So no tucking of the foam. That is located on the inside back of the chair. Yep, I'm stapling directly into the board. And I would say maybe about 16 staples will do. And keep in mind that you are going to add batting on top of your foam and fabric, so it'll be nice and smooth. Now, I wanted my foam on the back of the chair to be nice and snug. So here's what I did. I took the chair and I placed it face down. I pulled the foam around the edges of the back of the chair and I stapled the foam to the back of the chair. Not a lot of staples, of course. And then once that was snugly in place, I added the staples to hold the foam along the side of the chair, right there along the very edge. And then I cut away the excess foam. Now I decided to reinforce the inside arm and I just added a small piece of webbing. You see there, I went under the edge of that cardboard, and on this outside here, I just stapled it directly to the board. Now this armrest had lots of batting around it before, but this time I am using foam. I had some 1-inch foam left in the garage, so I decided to use that to give it an overstuffed look. Now I'm using some of that scrap foam that was left over from the seat cushion and the back to basically beef up those arms, and I want them to be very nice and soft. And then I stapled this 1-inch green foam around it very tightly, of course. Again, no spray adhesive. And the fact that the 1-inch foam is going to hold in the 2-inch foam, I think that's a bonus. And that means that top is going to be nice and soft to the touch. Now, the whole purpose around this video is to encourage anyone who has a desire to change their furniture in their home and does not have the finances to support their desire to take what they already have and make it beautiful, and start in stages. You know, start saving up, buy little things. Maybe you buy the fabric and maybe you buy the supplies one at a time, but eventually you will get there. So that's why I love doing these kinds of videos. They may be detailed, they may be a little bit longer, but I just feel like there's one person out there who needs this, who needs to change their environment to the best of their ability based upon whatever means they have, and that's what these videos are all about. So take on the attitude of, I am an amateur decorating like a pro in your home, and chances are you will be surprised about what you can accomplish. Now there was a small piece of wood that fell off of one of the armrests, so I used a little Gorilla wood glue as well as a couple of screws to put everything back in place. Just a minor repair. Now you don't have to do this, but I took a precaution. I measured the seat as well as the back. I just wanted to make sure that when I cut my pieces of batting that they were large enough to be tucked along the sides and over the front of the chair and the back before I stapled them. Now, if you're like me and you've got problems with your joints or your bones and things like that, then use pliers. They will help you tremendously with all of the pulling and tugging of fabric. They just eliminate so much strain on your arm and on your wrist and on your fingers. Now, I made a mistake in cutting the batting for the armrest. It should have been long enough to go underneath the seat cushion. I had to later add a piece, and you will see that later on. Now, I applied batting over all of the areas that had foam, but for the seat cushion area, I should have cut that piece a little bit larger. That way it would have covered the front band of the chair. You'll see that I corrected that mistake as well. Okay, I've had my coffee and now let's have some fun with fabric. You can purchase these large rolls of paper from Lowe's for around $11. I lay out my pattern pieces, trace around them, and I'm also able to label directly onto the paper. Just any additional notes as far as seam allowances or the direction of the fabric, like marking the center. And the other thing is take note of this fabric with this little extra piece of tan fabric on the end. That's there for a reason. It allows you to pull the fabric through the opening in the back, and that's a good thing. It gives it that extra tightness. Now I'm going to take advantage of that tip. Now these little arrows help me to identify how many splits to put into the new fabric. Just duplicating what was there before is a big help. Now using my sewing skills really does come in handy here, because I know that you can take a pattern that represents maybe 4 pieces and they're all identical, but one's on the left and one on the right. And all you have to do is turn that pattern over and cut on the reverse side, so that way you'd have your additional pieces for the opposite side. Does that make sense? Now, if you're in love with fabric with prints and medallions on them, you always need to buy extra because you need to center those medallions. I put that C using painter's tape in the center of the design. And it has to be centered on the back and on the seat. So even though this is not a sewing project, I'm going to use these pieces to center the design in the center of the back of the chair and in the seat cushion of the chair before I actually cut them with the scissors. Now, as you can see, I folded my pattern in half. And once you've cut half of the fabric, just flip it over and cut the other side, and you're perfectly centered. This is how I am able to do upholstery with any kind of fabric. And to my potential notions sponsors, electric shears, please. Hint, hint. Now my son was able to salvage one of the pieces of the arm panels, and now I can create my own design. I think it's great to write things down. I have here that I need 4 of these arm panels. The right sides of my fabric are facing each other, so that's something to keep in mind. Now here I'm measuring the fabric that goes over the inside arm around the armrest. And yeah, this looks like it's going to work out pretty good. And yeah, I did label them left and right. Now I cut all of my fabric in one day. Fabric for the Ottoman and fabric for 2 chairs. Now today's coffee tasted even better. It's time to apply fabric. Start by tucking the fabric around the armrest. Now, I knew going into this that the armrest would be the most tedious part of this project. I had to make sure that the fabric fit snugly all the time. So I constantly had to pull the fabric, make sure the grain lines were straight, and then also make sure that it pulled through straight from the outside, or shall I say from the inside to the outside. Now I was constantly checking to make sure that the fabric was pulled through the opening in the back of the chair. And then I was also looking underneath the armrest to make sure that the fabric was pulled through there. I was making sure that I got the smoothness that I wanted on the armrest before I began to staple it. And once I saw that the fabric was smooth after all of those tiny little cuts, I stapled it. Now I don't normally work with my stapler turned upside down, but the area underneath the armrest is very narrow. Now keep in mind, I am working on 2 chairs. Well, so far so good, guys. Let's keep going. Now my adrenaline was really pumping, guys. I was so excited with the progress that I had made. I placed the seat cushion fabric down and I wanted to finish up the armrest really quickly. So I've got my pleats in place using the upholstery pins, and now it's time to start stapling those down. Now after I completed the first armrest, I had a little rhythm going. For the pleats, I would staple down a pleat, and then I would add a staple down a pleat, and then add a staple. So it was like every other one until I got all 5 pleats done. And then I trimmed away the excess fabric. Now the outside arm is attached using the tack strip. So you just simply lay down the strip and then staple it in place. And remember to cover up those staples that were there earlier from the attachment of the inside arm. Now a lot of people don't like to do upholstery, or at least shall I say attempt to do upholstery, if the fabric has stripes or designs in it. And it's because they have to line up stripes, and that's what they call a grain line. But this worked out for me and I like it. Now as I stated earlier, the front band should have had batting applied to it. So I went back, took a small piece, folded it in half, and I stapled it to the front band of the chair. Now I learned that applying fabric to the armrest is twofold, because you're also going to be applying fabric to the seat cushion, and at the same time you're cutting away small pieces from the seat cushion to make sure that it fits snug around the edge. You're also wanting to make sure that the fabric on the armrest is snug, so in the end everything looks nice and smooth. So it was a lot of cutting away of small pieces, but not doing too much too fast. And this is something that you're just going to have to play with. Now this fabric easily frays, so I'm using my hot glue gun to put glue on the back side of the area that I might have to be concerned about. But this glue is going to solve all of my problems. Let it dry and tuck it back inside. Okay, so I am back from lunch, and here's what we got. We've got our fabric on the back and on the seat. The center lines up perfectly, and now all I will have to do is finish off the armrest on the outside, and we'll trim away around that front panel there, so when we place our panel on top of that, it'll lay nice and flat. Yep, let's go ahead and get started. Now these are stretching pliers for upholstery. I love them. I found them on Amazon about 2 years ago when I began to put together my little storage bin. I paid around $8 for them. They just help your wrist so much. You just grip the fabric, and the weight of them is about 1.5 to 2 pounds, and it does the stretching for you. Isn't that great? You really should get a pair if you plan on doing any kind of upholstery projects. Now once you've stapled the back, then staple the sides of the fabric. But do keep in mind, you do not want to off-center the fabric by pulling it too tight on the sides. So it may be best to put a couple of staples on both sides just to make sure that everything remains centered. Now the seat cushion has been attached on the back and now fully attached on the side, so we just trim away the excess. Now just like I had the afterthought to add the batting to the front band of the chair so that area would be nice and soft, I also decided to add the batting to the sides of the chair. Next, I stapled the outside arm of the fabric, leaving both of the ends on the left and on the right open. Now I am pulling the fabric from the outside arm into the front panel. Now this project had its share of trials and errors, but I'm so happy that I did it. Now I was a little concerned about the sharpness of that corner, so I placed a small piece of batting there just to give it a little curve. And then, of course, I stapled around it. And then you just staple your fabric from the sides of the arm panels to the front panel. What you want to do is try and stay in the center of that wood when you're stapling, because that's going to make sure that fabric doesn't buckle inward. And the other thing is, do all of the arms and the seats, etc. at the same time, because once you figure out how it's done, it's going to become so much easier after the first one. Now to me, this is where it gets easier. You trim away all of the excess fabric around the arm panel, and now you're getting ready to put a cover on it. That's why you don't want to have so much fabric underneath it that'll push it away. So we're getting ready to make a panel to cover this area. Okay guys, now you're not going to believe what I did to get my arm panel done. I basically took a sheet of paper and I laid it in front of the armrest. And then I trace it with a pencil from underneath. No ink, because I don't want to put any spots on my chair. And that basically was it. That's how I created my template for the arm panel. Now I wanted to make sure that the panel was in alignment with the wooden surface underneath, because I am going to apply tacks to that area. And like I said before, you're going to have to play with these things until you find a certain size or a certain design that you're looking for. Next time around, I think I'll create my panel before I apply fabric. So here's the next step. I needed some thick cardboard to go underneath the fabric that's going to be on the arm panel. And the thing is, I was not about to head to the store. So guys, I got a little creative. It just so happens that this writing pad was turned upside down, and I thought, hey, I'll just use the cardboard on the back of it. And it was absolutely perfect. I placed my template on top of it. I traced it, and yep, it was the perfect fit and the perfect thickness. So now let's get to work on our arm panels. I have my piece of cardboard laying on top, and now all I need is a little batting. This was just a little scrap piece left over. I'm raising it up because I'm using that Sharpie and I don't want to risk it going onto my seat cushion. After tracing the panel, I am cutting out the batting. Of course, fold it in half. You can cut 2 pieces at one time. And here I'm just double checking to make sure that I have the correct size cuts. Now I lightly applied hot glue around the edge of the cardboard. Just wanted to adhere the batting to it, but I didn't want to do too much of the hot glue. And then I folded the fabric, which was trimmed down fabric from the original cut, around the cardboard. And of course, again, do not put too much hot glue there. Remember, my tacks are going to be going through the cardboard. And around those curved edges, I just pinch the fabric. That way I get a very smooth edge on the panel. And remember to be careful, lightly apply the hot glue, even if that means turning the hot glue gun, the tip of it to the side, and smoothing out that hot glue. And the next thing you want to do is trim away the excess fabric. Remember those little pinch tucks that I was doing? It's easy to cut those away with your scissors. These are buttonhole scissors that I'm using. I've had them a very long time, and they are very, very sharp. I pinned the panel to the front of the armrest, and I liked what I saw. Now, I ordered several bags of these tacks a couple of years ago, and I don't even know the source, but I did get them on Amazon. They were very inexpensive, and they are a nickel. So it's really time to get rid of them. Now, I really like using these smaller pliers to hold down my tacks so I don't hurt my fingers, and a little piece of fabric just to continue tapping them in. I did try the tip of attaching a small piece of fabric to the tip of my hammer with just a rubber band, but I really need to see the tacks, so this is why I prefer to use those pliers and then go back with the small piece of fabric and just tap them in. Now, even though this is my first time working on this chair, I still wanted to make sure that it looked as neat as possible. So I was very aware of the edge of the panel along the side of the chair, which, you know, there's a board underneath there. And so I wanted to make sure those tacks were going into the board. So as I worked my way down to the bottom curve of the arm panel, I decided to apply a little hot glue underneath my panel to make sure that it stayed in place and that I stayed on track. And this is the result of the first panel install. So I come all the way down to the very corner of the seat. And then we're going to take the fabric here and fold it over the sides and then staple it under. And then we will be done with the installation of the seat cushion. Now, when it comes to the corners of the chairs, I never really mastered the art of maneuvering the fabric around these sharp corners. I tried to do all these cuts, but I was so nervous about making the wrong cut that I would cut too deep into the fabric. And I didn't have any of this striped fabric to spare. So yeah, you will certainly find some awkward moments. Now, while I was working on those armrests, I know you noticed that I also stapled the back of the seat cushion, and I also stapled the sides since they would be enclosed inside of the inside arm. So basically, once we wrap up the front band, we now have our fully installed seat cushion. I am cutting away the batting along the legs of the chair so that I can tuck it under and staple it down on the sides as well as across the front of the band. And once that's done, you want to make sure that all of the areas are tucked in neatly. Now we trim away the fabric on the sides. Just pull it snugly with your pliers if you need them and just staple them underneath the chair. Now, whenever I window shop, I always look at how things are made that I really would like to own. Do you do that? Well, I noticed that a chair that I had my eye on had just a simple fold right there around the front band. The fabric was just folded down. So I'm going to try that. I just cut away the excess fabric, and then basically you tuck the fabric under itself around the corner. And that's basically it. I stapled the fabric along the sides first, and then I did a simple little tuck of the fabric along the front band. Now, as I'm gently stretching the fabric, I'm vertically stapling just 3 staples into the fabric. And now I'm adding 3 more staples diagonally toward the corner. I trimmed away the excess fabric from around the leg of the chair, and then I tucked the fabric under so that it would lay nice and smooth. And once again, I stapled the fabric. Now the fabric around the corner looks a little puffy to me, so here's what I decided to do. I took my hot glue gun and I applied a little bit of glue away from the edge of the fold so that everything would lay flat. And I didn't want you to see hot glue from the outside, so with a little pressure from my hand for a couple of seconds, it worked out. Between the days of working on these chairs, I am working out, I'm working, I'm volunteering, I'm taking care of my family. I'm really busy. So wherever I can put in a couple of hours, that's exactly what I'm doing. Well, this is it, guys. I placed the fabric on the back of the chair, and I am verifying that the design is in the very center, from the center of the back all the way down to the seat cushion. So now it is time to start stapling. This is all or nothing. Let's just dive in. I start stapling the back of the fabric in the very center. Just want to make sure that everything remains lined up. And I put about 4 or 5 of them there just to hold it in place, just in case I have to remove these for some reason. I tucked the fabric underneath and pulled it through in the very back. You see where pliers come in handy? Yep, you don't want to strain your wrist or your fingers. And now I add a couple of staples there to hold it in place before I start to staple the sides of the fabric. So now we're back to the top. Let's staple the fabric all the way across the top. And you want to make sure that you go from side to side. That way you put equal pressure on the fabric as you're stapling. Now, I did not staple all the way across. I stopped about a 1/2 inch away from the corner. Next, I turned the chair on its side and I stapled the fabric to the back of the chair, very close to the inside edge of that board. So basically, I'm cutting a very small split at the corner of this fabric right here in the corner, so I can kind of tuck it around that board that I shared with you earlier. And then once the sides and the top of the inside back were done, I stapled the fabric to the back of the seat cushion in the back of the chair. Okay, now you just saw some strips of brown fabric sticking out of the back of the chair. Well, those are strips of fabric that I applied to this section of the inside back. I wanted to pull it tighter. That is solely optional, guys. You do not have to do that. Here's what I did. I took a needle and thread, I stitched the pieces to the edge of the fabric, and then I just pulled it through. It's just over and under stitch, something very, very simple. I then pushed the fabric back through and then pulled it through the back, and then I stapled it down. That made it tighter around the edge. Again, this is totally optional. You do not have to do this. And remember, I'm working on 2 chairs at the same time. And one more time, let me say this step is optional. Staple, staple, staple. Okay, now there's about to be a hallelujah moment. We are here. We're getting ready to do the outside back of the chair. Let's do it. So now, once again, I need to use the upholstery tack strip, the cardboard one. And I also need to use this flexible tack strip. It's made of metal and basically it can bend all over the place. But I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use these. They came with the chair. I'm going to recycle them and they are a whole lot stronger than the flexible ones. Now, I love this scalloped edge on this chair, so I decided to become adventurous. I pinned the fabric in the exact same shape, and those pins will actually put an indentation in the fabric, so I will see exactly where to staple that tack strip, and then I'll have a nice smooth edge. Now, leaving the pins in place, I applied some staples just a little bit below that indented line that I got from the folding of the fabric over the pins. Now, when I was applying this cardboard stripping, I was very careful not to tear it. And believe me, it's thick enough and it really isn't that fragile. So guys, I just basically bent it when I could, just a little bit. And when I needed to curve it a little bit more, I used my small shears and cut little tiny splits into it. And then I would fold it in a direction that I wanted it to bend. Now for those areas where I did a lot of little cuts, I reinforced it with just a small piece directly on top of that area. And I stopped stapling the strip about 1/2 of an inch away from the edge. Now this is another pioneer moment for me. You basically insert the metal tack strip underneath the fabric, and my measurement guide was basically the edge of the chair. And so now you basically turn that metal tack strip under and use your mallet and just gently hammer it down. So that was pretty easy. I was really impressed with how well this came out. But be careful that when you're pushing those tacks through the fabric, you don't push one of them into your finger. And you basically want to work from side to side as you move gradually down the back of the chair. That way you're stretching the fabric directly across. This is a small mallet. I really needed a large one, and I have the fabric on the tip of it to make sure that I don't apply any of that black rubber on the back of the chair. Now the fabric that I'm using on the back of the chair is so thick, I did not bother to add batting or any type of lining. It's just so thick. And perhaps I should have cut away some of the fabric from the inside back of the chair around the edges, but I didn't. I stretched the fabric as I stapled it underneath the chair. Sorry, I didn't film that. And lastly, at exactly 11:33 p.m. on a Saturday night, I added the dust cover. And hallelujah, I am done. Now it is so rewarding to have created a beautiful space like this to read or watch TV. When I turn the corner and see this setup, it's very relaxing and calming, and there are two chairs as opposed to one chair that we had there for a very long time. And like I said, this was indeed a learning process, and I'm really happy that I took on the challenge. So I hope that you're inspired to have an adventure like this with a piece of furniture or something that you find and maybe even inherit it, and just give it a quick update.
And thanks a lot for watching. And as always, I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Say in prayer and stay creative.